Can the US survive a mass deportation? This is actually genuine because I live in California and this is already starting to affect us. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's been some significant amount of deportations recently happening, and some farmers have already warned that food prices are gonna spike. So I don't know if this is gonna apply for the rest of the nation. Probably most states are gonna be completely fine, but uh, border states will be affected, in my opinion.
I will
Maybe not even opinion.
seal the border, stop the invasion, and we will begin the largest deportation operation in American history.
According to the latest estimates, approximately 11.7 million undocumented immigrants currently reside in the United States, which amounts to roughly 3.5% of the total US population. The United States has more international migrants than any other country in the world, surpassing the total of the next four countries combined. In recent years, the United States has not deported more than 500,000 immigrants under formal removal orders in a single fiscal year. If President Trump follows through on his promise, the country could see a deportation operation on an unprecedented scale.
Is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it. You have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally.
Last time there was a lot of focus on building the wall. This time there's much more focus on the interior and much more rhetoric about the interior. So I think that they will feel the need to really show some results.
So how exactly will the mass deportation be carried out? And what impact will it have on the US economy?
As I already said, at least in my region of the country, we've already been affected. Not severely, but it's already begun to affect food prices.
Many experts warn that a deportation of such scale could be devastating to the American economy.
Congressional Budget Office has estimated that the surge in illegal immigration over the last few years will increase gross domestic product by about $9 trillion cumulatively over the next decade, reduce the deficit by about $1 trillion. These are very significant, and it's only part of the illegal immigrant population that he's talking about rolling back or eliminating.
Unauthorized immigrants are key parts of the workforce, especially in agriculture, construction, manufacturing, and the service sector.
Now, this is the thing. Migrants, specifically, the reason why they're saying that the illegal migrants are such a positive thing is because when it comes to the bottom line of the country, yes, it does affect positively because they're essentially just indentured servants. It's cheap labor. They don't have to pay them for healthcare, no 401k, stuff like this. Like it's just cheaper overall to hire them. And since they can't work in more specialized jobs, they can't really decide to leave a certain job that they don't like. They just have to stick with it, which means that likelihood is they'll perform better. Now, with that being said, the the country's bottom line does not equal the average citizen's bottom line. Does that make sense? Mass deportations is not gonna benefit the country. It's gonna benefit the people that live within the country because if if there aren't as many immigrants, then companies will need to raise their wages, um, and obviously the jobs are gonna have to provide better accommodations for their employees. Basically, more job opportunities for the citizens and better living standards, even if prices do end up going up.
So those areas of the economy would be hit particularly hard when there's fewer workers to take the jobs in those sectors. But US born people do not slot into those jobs that are left behind by unauthorized workers.
That is a fair concern. Um, a lot of a lot of people, a lot of citizens, U.S. citizens, they will not take over those jobs. But with enough pay and enough incentive, some will.
And that's because the jobs are less desirable.
Immigrants are also consumers. So if you have a community where 10% of the people are unauthorized immigrants and suddenly those people are no longer there, buying all of the other goods and services, and that can hurt the whole economy of that community.
To be fair, she does have a very good point because there are plenty of businesses that directly target immigrants, and without immigrants, those businesses wouldn't exist. Those businesses would literally shut down. So, when viewing from that point of view, it makes sense.
Research has also shown that 44,000 US born workers could lose their job for every 500,000 immigrants removed from the labor force.
As an example, if there's a construction company and they rely on an immigrant workforce to do some of the hard labor, the roofing, the digging, the laying of bricks, but they also employ a lot of other workers as well who might be US born to do marketing, to be an accountant, to manage the workers, to manage relationships with clients. If that firm loses their immigrant workers who do the manual labor, they may also need to lay off their US born workers who perform a variety of other jobs because they can't sign contracts if they don't have the workers to do the work.
A sudden reduction in the labor force could also have an impact on prices.
There's a sense that new immigrants have placed a strain on the United States and really taken a lot of resources at the same time that Americans were struggling with the impacts of high inflation and rising prices.
Now, what JD Vance said isn't exactly wrong, because at least here in California, illegal immigrants can buy a home, with their taxes number, the I-10, they can buy a home. So that automatically opens an entirely new market for realtors to sell to, which in turn raises the prices of homes. However, I don't think this applies to every single state, but it would explain a lot of the blue states.
But immigrants, especially unauthorized immigrants, are much more likely to work in the types of jobs that create the goods and services where we're seeing the prices go up. And so we can't say for sure what the effects will be, but based on what we know from past mass deportation efforts, it seems like,
As I said at the beginning of the video, this exact thing is already happening here in California because of some deportations that have begun. But with enough incentive and enough government support, this should not be a problem.
especially on these goods and services where unauthorized immigrants are super concentrated, like construction and agriculture, that the prices are likely going to go up.
Undocumented immigrants are also a substantial source of revenue for governments, paying $96.7 billion in federal, state, and local taxes.
This is something that I think a lot of people don't realize, is that a lot of immigrants actually do pay taxes. Um, of course, there's gonna be always the new ones, the ones that have been arriving or whatnot. They will always either not know or outright not care about taxes. But a lot of the ones who have been living here for decades, they do pay. And there you go, that's the number.
In 2022.
And so if we were to remove immigrants, this would have a negative effect on the federal government budget. And this is especially true for really important programs like Medicare and Social Security. Immigrants typically pay into those programs, but they're not eligible to receive benefits from those programs. And we know that those are programs that are having huge budget crises already, and we expect them to have even bigger crises in the future.
Well, I would go back to what I think Tom Homan said and others, which is what is the price of national security? How do you put a price on not having within your borders literally hundreds of thousands of people about whom you know nothing? Congress decides to let in another 5 million aliens for whatever reason and make them Americans in a different process. That's Congress's privilege and prerogative. But until they change the laws, we have to enforce the laws.
The net cost of illegal immigration for the United States was estimated at $150.7 billion at the start of 2023.
Entirely open borders and a welfare state absolutely does not compute. You're seeing this not just in the United States, you're seeing it in Great Britain, in Canada, in Germany, in France, in Italy, where the needs of this large population of recent arrivals are exceeding the capacity of the host country to sustain them.
However,
As I already pointed out, the recently arrived immigrants are more likely to not pay into taxes and to, well, in this case, adding on top of that, they will use more benefits because since they barely arrived, government agencies, support groups, charities, whatever, they're gonna advise them to use those benefits to basically settle into the U.S. Of course, this sort of aid wasn't always available, and a lot of the immigrants that have been living in the U.S. for decades and that who arrived when these government aids weren't available are the ones who are paying taxes and have like stable lives nowadays and stuff like that. But the yes, this is definitely a problem of the new arrivals that specifically the ones that have been arriving to big cities such as New York. As you may have heard, New York has a very massive problem with immigrants using government aid and not really working or doing anything else, not doing anything productive.
some experts question how much undocumented immigrants can benefit from government welfare.
Unauthorized immigrants, unlike refugees or asylum seekers that actually do have at least some kind of legal status, are not eligible for most federal, state, and local.
Okay, I hadn't thought about that. A lot of the people who've been using the government assistance are refugees and legal quote unquote immigrants. That's mostly what New York has been facing, now that I realize.
Programs. And so unauthorized immigrants are actually much less expensive if you're thinking just in terms of government spending.
Nonetheless, major cities across the US have seen immense spending in response to the sudden influx of migrants. New York City is projecting to spend $4.75 billion on asylum seekers in fiscal year 2025.
But New York is like they're a bunch of idiots. They don't know how to manage any of this. They've just been throwing money at the situation. And I mean, if you think about it, if a foreign city is just throwing money at you, why not exploit the system? I'm not justifying them. I'm just saying. But yeah, that is definitely one of the regions of the US that really needs to be solved.
And Chicago has spent over $600 million on costs associated with new arrivals.
I've been watching people in Chicago and New York who have lived there for generations complaining to their local government that, look, what about us? You guys are spending billions of dollars on social services that we don't qualify for people who just arrived in the country last night.
Exactly. There you go.
The exact logistics of Trump's operation remain unclear, but the incoming administration has emphasized that it would prioritize deporting individuals who pose a threat to the United States.
We're starting with the criminals, and we got to do it.
I would say that they are taking very seriously the idea of resuming law enforcement and trying to reestablish the rule of law.
I think most Americans would agree that if somebody's in the United States without authorization and they've murdered someone or committed some other terrible kind of crime, that they should be deported.
But some experts question the intent behind these claims.
If you look at what they did last time, they rescinded the requirement to target criminals first that was in place under the Obama administration. So there's absolutely no basis for claiming they will go after criminals first.
President-elect Trump has also stated that he will declare a national emergency to carry out his plans.
Now that part of the national emergency, I don't even know if that might if Congress might even allow him to do that. Because I mean, is it actually a national emergency? It's definitely a problem that needs to be solved, but I don't know if national emergency. I don't know if the national emergency was created for something like this.
This grants the president over 130 special authorities, including the ability to redirect certain funds to initiatives that the president deems necessary. During his first term, Trump used a similar approach to allocate billions of dollars toward building the border wall, after Congress had originally rejected his request.
Main constraints on removals, in many cases, it does come down to funding and logistics and appropriation and priorities. And this time, they have more allies in Congress who want to fund the operation.
It would cost the U.S. an estimated $88 billion annually to deport 1 million immigrants per year.
So yeah, to be fair, they won't be able to, in 4 years, they won't be able to deport every single immigrant. But they will be able to deport the most problematic ones.
That's essentially 10 years of ICE's budget in 1 year. And it's going to be used in ways that are much more, whether I want to call it efficient, I don't know, but cost effective than what they're doing now.
A critical component of Trump's plan involves using military assets to aid the effort.
That's what I mean by state of emergency. Usually, when a president invokes a state of emergency for the nation, it's to use the military, and I don't think Congress would approve of such strategy, specifically because the military is it has like one role, and it's very it can go very wrong. Let's just put it that way.
The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 has generally prevented presidents from deploying federal military personnel as a domestic police force.
There you go. I thought so.
During America's largest deportation operation in 1954, this law prevented President Eisenhower from using troops to return more than 1 million Mexican immigrants out of the country.
We have a tradition in the United States dating back a century and a half that the military is not used on U.S. soil to enforce civilian laws. And this would be a breach in that custom.
But there are other ways that the military can assist without directly enforcing the law themselves.
Lesser involvement from the military wouldn't really be unprecedented, involving them as hosts for immigration detention centers, not really that unusual.
It's more likely that members of the military would do back-end operations, sort of paperwork, freeing up ICE agents to do actual arrests and more direct processing of people.
Trump has also discussed invoking laws like the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to help out with the operation.
The Alien Enemies Act is an authority under which the President of the United States can order non-citizens who are from a country with which the United States is at war or being subject to an invasion. They can detain them, arrest them, and remove them from the United States strictly based on their nationality. While on its
Wait a second. So does that include countries such as Venezuela, China, Russia, stuff like that? Because that being the case, then all of those refugees that came from Venezuela, they're gonna be detained, and then are they gonna be sent back to their country as refugees?
face, it seems pretty clearly to go beyond what the statute envisioned. Many courts are loath to intervene and take a stance on issues related to national security or war and peace.
Meanwhile, Tom Homan, who will be overseeing border control and immigration during Trump's second term, has indicated that the administration could rely on private contractors for tasks that do not require credentials. Companies like GEO Group and Core Civic, which have previously assisted ICE with migrant detention efforts, saw their stock values soar following Trump's election.
Okay. See, I wanna trust the government and assume that they know what they're doing, but as far as I am aware, specifically these private corporations that focus on uh, moving people or like detaining people and stuff like that, they they don't have a very good reputation on human rights. So I don't know. I don't know.
Given the existing resources towards immigration enforcement activity, there is no way to do a deportation effort on the scale that Trump has talked about. Any mass deportation effort of 1 million people or more would require huge resource investments, including contracting with private companies likely to build more detention centers. We're actually seeing that happen under President Biden right now. More detention centers are being built. So I would expect that to continue if there was some kind of mass deportation, increase.
Experts say that the great challenge to the deportation plan may lie in securing cooperation from the states.
The majority of deportations happen after somebody's picked up by local law enforcement, whether for a minor crime or a major crime. ICE finds out that that person's in custody. They request to the local law enforcement to hold that migrant for up to 48 hours. And then ICE comes and takes custody and starts people's processing for removal. For a variety of reasons, more jurisdictions have decided not to comply with these requests from ICE to hold people. These local policies seem to be one of the reasons.
Wait a second. So are police departments? Wait, hold on. So police departments are refusing to detain immigrants for more than for like the 48 hours that ICE requires them to be detained? Is that what's going on?
With these requests from ICE to hold people. These local policies seem to be one of the reasons why interior deportations dropped from the Obama administration to the Trump administration, even though the Trump administration last time also said that they wanted to really ramp up deportations and immigration enforcement.
If he knowingly harbors and conceals an illegal alien, I will prosecute him.
Tom Homan directed those powerful words at Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson as the incoming border czar gets ready to conduct a mass deportation starting next month.
The federal government has competency for immigration matters, not the states, and they're challenging the federal government to do its job. What I would say to that is there's a lot of federal money flowing into these cities and states, supporting their police, their justice system, their educational system, their hospitals, and all kinds of other things that they expect the federal government to give them. I don't really see why the federal government, at least the White House, would support giving billions of dollars to cities and states that are ignoring their obligation to help the federal.
That's a fair point. That is a very fair point. If they don't want to cooperate, if they want to cooperate with the government won't cooperate with them.
Federal government. So we may end up with a situation where there's a financial crunch, which forces a rethink.
The question of how to approach immigration in the U.S. is as complex as the issue is divisive.
I think that our current conversation has been really divisive and also very black and white. It's, for or against mass deportation. But I think that there's some nuance that could be found. We could both enforce our immigration laws more at the border, think about removing people who are a threat to our country, and think about offering some legal status to people who have been an important part of our workforce, of our communities, who have, U.S. born children. I think Americans would support that. I think that Congress is not ready to talk about it. Congress is struggling to pass legislation overall. It's really struggling to pass immigration legislation, and partisan politics get in the way. But I actually think there are solutions that Americans are pretty broadly in agreement with.
And not to mention that they need the cheap labor. And that's something that a lot of people kind of don't want to admit, but yeah. So let me put it this way. Trump will deport millions. But once he's out of office, what do you think Democratic leaders will do? Because let's be honest, there will be another Democratic president. It's inevitable. They'll they will probably reintroduce more immigrants into the nation, and the process will continue. You clearly saw that these deportations have been happening for 100 years, maybe more, and the cycle continues. People still have the same opinion, and the same strategy it keeps getting used. Now, I do have the hope that with the with the tariffs that Trump has been putting on China and the fact that Biden continued those tariffs and Trump is planning to extend those tariffs, there might be a light at the end of the tunnel in a scenario in which those industries, those factories, come back to the U.S. and the extra factories go to Mexico as well, and that will inevitably cause Mexico to become wealthy enough to prevent its citizens from wanting or actively pursuing to leave the country and come to the US. And that would in turn stop the flow of immigration to the extent that it has happened for more than 100 years at this point. At least that's my hope. And I hope that a lot of people don't wish don't wish badly on others, but rather wish that we can all get out of a cycle of poverty and struggle.